city staff at any time for an item on the agenda or a non-agenda item. Cards submitted after public comment has begun for the item will be provided to the commission at the conclusion of the public comment for that item. We have one request to speak. It's on item 3, so we will take that when we get to item 3. So the first thing on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. We have a request for approval of the minutes for the April 10th, 2026 regular commission meeting.
So
Commissioner
moved.
Carla. Second. Okay. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes. All those in favor say aye.
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 Now we'll go on to the review of the proposed fiscal year 2026-2027 operating budget by fund. So the first item on that is continuation of the general fund discussion. If there's any continuation needed, if anybody has anything that we didn't bring up during the last meeting on the general fund.
When I listened to the replay of the meetings, you said there was going to be a time for Commissioner Badenoff and I to ask any questions we might have. So let me know where that would fit into the meeting.
No, that's now.
That's now?
Yeah, that's
okay.
now.
Okay.
So Commissioner Stevens.
I can go first then? Okay. And I did present a lot of my questions to staff so that no one would be blindsided. Let me try to go through this as quickly as I can. The first one's on the police PSRS. You talked about that at your last meeting. What I wanted to make sure everyone understood, and my question is why we're not funding more of it again this year. The economics of it are, whenever you do a $10 million advance funding to it, you get $800,000 of benefit of lower expenses in the operating fund. The reason is you're investing that $10 million at 2%, but you can get 8% by putting it in the pension fund and lowering future pension costs. You'll also see in the budget, they've allocated, restricted over $50 million for PSRS, which has been their practice in fund balance. If you did the whole $50 million, that would save $4 million a year in operating expenses in the police department. So I want you all to just understand that. That's the mechanics we covered last year. We're making 2% instead of 8%. But to do that, you'd be giving up $50 million. It is designated in fund balance towards that. So I guess my question would be, what is the reason why nothing has been proposed for the pay down of the PSRS when it has such an economic benefit?
Thank you for that question, Chair Schweiker, members of the commission. The PSPRS contributions of $50 million hasn't been reflected in our actuarial valuations yet. So we are waiting for the 2026 valuation report, which will include the $50 million additional contributions and the investment earnings of the plan, and the economics of it may have changed. We are earning up to 4% in our investment portfolio now, not just 2%. And the actuarial valuation discount rate is 7%, not 8%. So some of that dynamics have changed. We also have a fire PSPRS plan that probably will need additional contributions. So between the police and the fire and some of this change in dynamics and economics, we need to wait for the 2026 valuation, which will come out in December, before we determine what our strategy is moving forward. So we are aware of that savings and that economics, and so we definitely agree that by paying off the unfunded liability, you do save a tremendous amount, and that's why we included that $50 million last year. But moving forward, we really need to wait for the 2026 valuation to be able to see what our strategy is moving forward.
Okay, last year you told me that you had to limit your investment dollars because of the arbitrage rebate rules that don't allow you to invest money in excess of some of the lower debt amounts that you have, but that's changed now?
So Commissioner Stevens, that only relates to bond proceeds that we borrow and receive.
Okay.
That does not relate to all our investments.
Okay, then, okay. My second question, this will tie into something you talked about at the meeting, and I think Commissioner Newman mentioned. It has to do with the employee health insurance. You're largely self-insured on a lot of that. You have a $350,000 umbrella on that. Have you done any sensitivity analysis? I think Commissioner Newman asked about that, whereby you said, what would the savings be if I increased it to $1 million? And what's my historic claim experience been between $350,000 and $1 million, so I can make a judgment about whether that would be a good economic decision. So that may be a yes or no question, and we can think about it in the future, but
Yeah, so, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, that would probably require discussion with our benefits consultant. The 350,000 level is recommended by our benefits consultant. They do provide analysis of different stop-loss levels, but if the commission wants to explore further, you probably should agendize a future item so that we can have our benefits consultant here to explain the stop-loss levels.
So the staff has not considered whether that would be a good economic decision to do a sensitivity analysis on that?
We would have to probably have our underwriters and our benefits consultant run some analysis for us if the BRC so desires.
So Mark, are you making a recommendation for that for future, or are you just asking the question?
Well, you mentioned at the last meeting. Later on, we're going to be talking about recommendations. You already talked about it at the last meeting, so that may end up being a recommendation. So I'm not necessarily making that now. We can wait to the recommendation part of the meeting.
Okay, and I think Carla had a comment. Maybe was that on PSPR?
Yeah, it dovetails in that. I just want to make sure Commissioner Stevens know that we have a proposed recommendation to look at the PSPRS once the data is in
Yeah,
December.
I remember that. Yeah, I wasn't sure exactly what that ran to, but okay, thank you. Okay, the other thing is I wanted to talk about the vacant position credit. And again, I just want my fellow commissioners to understand what that's all about. Last year, we had a vacant position credit of $11 million. What that means is the city says, we recognize that out of all these hundreds of vacant positions we have, some will never be filled. Therefore, we don't want to pad our budget too much by having the expenses overstated. And so they actually have an expense reduction in there. Last year, it was $11 million. That's not something a lot of cities do. A lot of cities like to not do that, so they have the unfilled positions there as a cushion. That way the different department people can not necessarily fill the position, go over budget somewhere else, and then in total they still look okay. So that's something some cities do. But since they're doing it now, what my observation is, I heard at the last meeting, we said a lot of work was done to eliminate vacant positions, and $2.8 million of those were eliminated. Just so you all know, that 2.8 went away as an expense, but you also took away $5 million of the credit. So you actually, despite all the things that were looked at, you've had an increase of about a couple $1 million with respect to personnel and the way they do the reserve, okay? My question that I kind of gave the staff a heads up to is, can you briefly describe if there's a calculation to the vacant position credit, because you've actually increased the budget by a couple $1 million this year by lowering it from 11 to 6. And then also you sent a message out a couple of hours ago, and that indicated, if I read this right, that actually your percentage of unfilled positions actually has gone up a little bit since the end of last year. So your percentage vacancies are. So the answer to this question would end up being some dynamics have changed within the city whereby you now believe the positions you have vacant are going to get filled at a much higher rate than has historically been the case. But that's, the question is maybe to educate us a little bit on the vacant position reserve that fell by $5 million.
Mr. Chair, I'm happy to start off with that and then look to my colleagues to add it. I would look at them as independent or two separate initiatives. They can certainly have a correlation. Let me take the reduction in vacant positions. So as a reminder, we took 2% of all our positions, but so that we wouldn't have layoffs per se or reduction in force, the positions that were eliminated, we would look to vacant positions. So to the question, I think it was actually 2.6 million that was saved for vacant positions. So we will end up having less vacancy savings because we have fewer positions. And so it's probably a four-pronged answer. One, we have fewer positions. It's really about 33. It comes out 33 positions. It comes out about 48 because of some pipeline positions that we refer to it. So some of the vacant positions that we have vacant are fewer. Those are fewer vacant positions. Other thing we've done is increase wages, not just generally across the board, but we had what I would refer to as some chronic vacancies. I use a case in point, dispatchers, where we had a good number of dispatch positions that were vacant. For a long time, that's the chronic piece. So we raised wages for those positions. So we will have fewer vacancies because of that. So that factors into fewer vacancies. And then also the timing of hiring, that $6 million, if you will, in savings, we have to be cautious not to have the 11 because sometimes when we have vacancies that we know of, the old legacy school of thought was wait till it's vacant, you go out, you recruit, and you fill in, say, 60 to 90 days. That is not how recruitments work in this day and age. Some of them, because of the complexity of the positions, you have to start before the person leaves. So this allows us to call dual fill or overfill while people are still on board. So I would look at them independently. We have looked to reduce our position count strategically through our organization and just asked for 2%. And just to emphasize, there were positions that were not eligible or not counted in that, and that's sworn positions. So said another way, police and fire, their sworn positions were not in that calculation. And again, just to help everybody with the math, I know this group's good with the math, but maybe for the viewing audience, if you had a department that is 100 people, 100 positions, then we would look to reduce 2 positions, and then we would only look to vacant positions. So if the department hypothetically was fully filled at 100 positions, then they wouldn't be required to give up any. If they had,
You know, we can stop now, just in the interest of time, so we don't take away too much of our time for questions. It sounds like one of the key answers there is you change the dynamics in which you're filling positions, and that is causing vacant positions to go away at a higher rate. Therefore, the $11 million reserve is not as appropriate now. So that resonated there. Okay, the other question is, a question was asked last meeting about the dynamics of multiple police departments, more than 3, all wanting to be in the top 3. And if you can just give me a 1 or 2 minute observation on that. That math doesn't work. That's inflationary. If 6 departments are all trying to be in the top 3, you're going to keep leapfrogging each other, and that's going to be a problem. Are you considering looking at any other way to measure other than just salaries like that? Otherwise, you've got to build in inflationary nightmare here potentially.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner, it's not just salary, it's also other things such as longevity pay, comp time as we refer to it, post-employment, and so there's kind of a matrix of what we look at. There is one agency that wants to be number 1, and this is kind of the development of how this came about. There's another agency of our 9 or so peer communities that we look at that really tries to be number 2. So what we were trying to achieve with the council resolution and our recommendation for council approval was around this 3 spot. We do not have, separate from the resolution, a labor agreement. Other organizations do have a labor agreement. And this resolution for public safety, just to remind everybody, would cover the sworn police and fire, and the idea is to be 3rd. We analyze it every spring and then look for implementation. There's certainly the opportunity, I'll call it some leapfrogging, as we get to 3rd, then through the cycles that they might have to increase. But the idea is we'll end up close. We'll all end up bunched, kind of a Peloton area, if you will. And so there'll be kind of the 1 or 2, and then there's kind of the purpose with the resolution, what we were trying to achieve is we hadn't gone out to check the market, so we slid to 9th, and that's not acceptable. So we go on an annual basis, and then there was this commitment to be 3rd. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I guess part of my hope is we're a special department. We probably have some other reasons why people would want to work for us. So I see our police chief here. So hopefully as our sworn people get educated on all these wonderful things we have, the grass is not greener on the other side. And then hopefully we don't necessarily have to be too far into the top 3. But I'll let you all manage that. The other thing was, I don't recall on the roads budget, I think there's about $40 million you've put in for every year. But you haven't talked about the dynamics behind that, have you? And I don't want to take more than a minute or two, but is there kind of like a plan? Here's what we're going to do next year. Here's how it's going to be sequenced. And then by the end of the year, we think the PCI will now go from whatever up. And then do you have certain metrics for each of the years on the PCIs you want to get to in order to get there? And again, just take a minute or two because I want to save time for the rest of the meeting.
The short answer is yes, then.
Yes? So you do have a specific plan laid out? Okay.
Yes, sir.
You asked for a short answer, and you
No,
got that.
that's fine, and that's something we may want to look at in the future if we're allowed to.
Mark, before you go further, I
Yeah.
think Commissioner
I'm almost
Lettieri had a comment
Oh,
on
yeah.
something you were talking about a minute ago.
Actually, no, it's not. It's
Oh.
regarding the email that Greg sent out today regarding
Oh,
the
okay.
update on
Gotcha.
costs.
Go ahead, Commissioner Stevens.
I'm going to leave the other, I'll leave my other questions out. The one thing I was going to mention, I didn't know if this group wanted to look at the proposed fund balance designations, because that is in the book, so just so you're aware of that. So I don't know if that's something you want to look at. And then the final comment I wanted to make, big picture-wise, you all were shared this slide that indicated the cost went up by about $12 million when you take out PSRS. Just so you know, that was compared to budget, okay? Actual is tracking much more favorably to that. And so if you do the same comparison by looking at the actual forecasted numbers for this year, it's going to be going up by $22 million or 54%. So I know you've heard a lot of things about budget cost and cuts and everything, but just so you know, it's going up from what's expected to be actual by over 5%. But we haven't had a chance to get into that. I'm not asking that we do, just be aware of it. Part of it's ambulance. Ambulance is the scope went up. So that's what's tough about looking at just raw numbers like that, because some of the things that go up have revenue that go up with it. But that's all I have for my budget questions.
Thank you. Oh, Carla? Or Bob, I'm sorry, Bob. Now it's time for yours. Commissioner Lettieri.
Yes. This question is addressed to the city manager regarding what you sent out today? Yeah, okay. I'm going to focus on page 3 of 4. Page 3 of 4.
Sure.
Now, I
Could
assume
you speak
where
into the
say
microphone a little bit more, Bob, for the audience?
24-25 fiscal year, you ended at 7.9. I would assume that that's the starting point for the next fiscal year, which is 25-26, correct?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So,
No, but is that correct? That's your starting point, 7.9,
vacancy?
for the next fiscal year? Because in the paragraph above, it says you started the year with a 6.11 vacancy rate.
So what I was, Mr. Chair and Commissioner, what I was about ready to articulate is what we tried to message through the memo is that we start, when we load new positions, and particularly the current fiscal year, I think it was either 98 or 99. So what happens is when you take a snapshot on July 2nd, it looks like we have a big vacancy rate. So what that tried to articulate is we, in the current July 1st of 2025, we added new positions, significant new positions, and so then when we're asked about vacancy rate, then it looks bigger in July versus when it does in June. And so I just wanted to illustrate that. I'm still pulling it up, and let me bring in my colleague here, Senior Human Resources.
Yeah, I'm
Director.
just trying to reconcile the starting point.
Yep.
So this is a pattern we do see at the start of our fiscal year. If positions are added, the vacancies rate goes up because we haven't had time to recruit for those positions because they're brand new. And we see a pattern by the end of the fiscal year as we have recruitment activity, we fill positions, that it typically goes down to 7.7, 7.9%. It just shows kind of a metric that we look at from human resources, and in the organization, it shows we're having a healthy filling of positions.
It just looks like you're presenting a moving target, but I
Yeah,
understand. It's a
it'll
different
change
point in
over time.
To that point, so it's a great observation because it really is a snapshot. Somebody asked for it today, we'll give a snapshot. People leave today, we hired today. It's always constant.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments? Otherwise, we will move on to the Preservation Fund.
Okay. Next, before we move on to the Preservation Fund, I just wanted to let the commission know that these are the funds that we are covering today. The Preservation Fund, the Parks and Preserve Tax Funds, that's the Prop 490.15 Park and Preserve Tax. And all these other funds listed, the Aviation Stadium Risk Management, those are at the commission's discretion. If there is time and if you would like for us to go through these funds, we can certainly do that. So next slide. Next slide. So the Preservation Fund is the fund that accounts for the 1995.2% McDowell-Sonoran Preserve Tax and also the 2004.15 Preserve Tax. The 1995 tax expired in June 30 of 2025, and the .15 tax does not expire till June 34. The fund accounts for the collection of these two taxes, and the uses is the debt service on the preserve debt, of which we have $125.8 million of principal outstanding as of the end of this fiscal year, and all that debt matures in 2034. It also accounts for any eligible capital improvements in the preserve, which are authorized only for use of the .15 tax. Next slide. So for fiscal year 25-26, the expenditures that are budgeted are the debt service expenditures of $26.4 million, and also the proposed expenditures of $17.8 million, which is a change of $8.6 million and a decrease of 32.6%, and that is because of the expiration of the .2 1995 tax. So the debt related to that .2 tax has been paid off, and the remaining debt is related to the .15 tax. And that's it. That's it. I can answer any questions if you have any.
Commissioner Carla.
Yes, I just would ask if perhaps Nick can give a quick explanation, because in the budget line item on the .15, the 2004 tax, it says that if projects are completed, and in the budget line item, it shows it stopping at a certain point before 2034. But there are projects. So I would just ask if perhaps Nick could just give a quick update on those and the possibility that there may be new ones.
Chair Schweiker, members of the Budget Review Commission, Nick Molinari, Senior Director over the Parks and Recreation and Preserve Departments. And Commissioner Carla, that's absolutely correct. We followed the same pattern for the establishment of our capital budget for the rest of the city, and we went over some of those the capital plan in a previous Budget Review Commission meeting. But really, with the exception of one of our capital projects, which is the Browns Ranch trailhead improvements that we plan to do next year, we are doing design for the rest of the projects. So we pulled the construction estimates out of the 5-year plan, similar to what we did with the capital budget. And our goal over the next 18 to 24 months is probably a better time frame for that, is to get really good hard estimates for those projects, which were very general estimates that had been put together several years ago. So to answer your question directly, Commissioner Carla, yes, there's lots of projects that will be funded through the 2004 tax that we are committed to design for this upcoming fiscal year.
Commissioner Stevens.
Yeah, if I'm looking right, I think this is page B16. You have forecasted $35 million of transfer to the CIP in 2028 through 2030, and then you also forecast almost $40 million being in equity at the 2030, 2031. Just what are those all about? Because I thought you were only doing CIP for projects that were known and basically calculable. So what's that for, the 217 millions that are out there?
So I can answer that. So right now, Chair Schweiker, Vice Chair Stevens, the $217 million allocations are what the current estimates are, and I hate to use this terminology, but we had originally put in as placeholders for the wildlife crossing. So we are in the process this year of conducting the feasibility study for the wildlife crossing, and we expect that those numbers are going to change. We've already started that process, and we've made significant progress in that project, that feasibility study. But we had kept the expense budget in the 5-year plan for the wildlife crossing. That wasn't a budget estimate that we had taken out. So those numbers will likely change.
Okay, I guess I'm a little confused about what happened this year. It sounds like for some of these things that you couldn't project correctly, you took them out. And for some like this, you left it in even though you don't have a good dollar amount because you don't know what it's going to look like.
I can address that, Mr. Chair and Commissioner. We did it 99.9% of the projects. This is the one. And
okay.
For the
Fair enough.
group, I might point out that there were a couple, and we've certainly heard about
Okay.
pulling those out. So this is the one.
Okay. Oh, what about the ending balance? There's like 40 million at the end. Is the idea there might be some projects in the future that has to be expended for?
And Vice Chair Stevens, yes, there are several projects that the McDowell-Sonoran Preserve Commission has asked our staff to take a look at that are qualified expenditures through the 2004 tax. We don't know what those are going to look like at that point.
Okay, it's appropriately in fund balance. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Lettieri.
I'm focusing on page B16, very top line, debt service reserve. Your proposed is 17.8 million, and the forecast is 115 million, and then it disappears. So what is that?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, if you look at page B16 under the transfers out for debt service, you'll see in fiscal year 27-28, 115.7 million in debt service payments. So about 2 years ago, there was discussions on council to consider terminating the tax early when all the debt can be paid off, and if there are no longer any need to continue collecting the tax. So the 5-year forecast was developed with those considerations. However, there are legal considerations to terminating the tax early, and council will need to discuss and decide on that. And as we heard, the Preserve Commission is also considering any further need or improvements that would qualify. But the drop in that reserve is because we will be paying off early all the remaining debt in 27-28.
Commissioner Newman.
Along those lines, I do have a recommendation. It'll come up, but it's relevant here, that once we pay that off, then you have a tax that's collecting money that then sequesters that. And we have other places in our overall budget where there are needs, because I really feel strongly we have a mismatch between the revenues and where the money is and needs to be spent, like roads or infrastructure, things like that. And I really think we need to look at that and decide, because I'm convinced that the parks and preserves are going to be well funded with the 0.25 or 0.3% taxes that we have now. But this is a tax where I think we should consider repurposing this. We'll get to that in a moment after a bit, but repurposing here would be very important, and then restructuring some things so that everybody gets what they want. But then we can take those $25 or $30 million of funds each year that are going to be sequestered once we pay the debt off, and then that's going to be just held. And I don't think taxpayers want it locked up in a place where we could use it to put it to good use in other areas.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions or any more discussion on the preservation fund? All right, otherwise, let's move on to the Park and Preserve tax funds, the 2025.15% tax.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next section will examine the various funds that receive revenues from the new 0.15% Park and Preserve tax. And we'll start on page B30 for anyone following along. Okay, thank you. We're on the next slide. The first fund that we're going to look at is called the Park and Preserve Tax Allocation Fund. That's the fund on page B30. This fund shows the accounting of the 0.15% Park and Preserve tax that the city began collecting in July of 2025. The tax is allocated by council ordinance, and the first allocation is for debt service for Westworld drainage projects. And then after that transfer takes place, the remainder is transferred out to the various park and preserve tax funds according to the percentages on the slide there. 14% to park maintenance, 18% preserve maintenance, 7% for the police park rangers fund, 10% to the fire mitigation and technical rescue fund, and then 51% to park improvements. Can we go to the next slide? So if you look at page B30, I want to just walk through how the projected revenues are going to be allocated very briefly. If you focus on the gray shaded column at the top, the beginning fund balance of the allocation fund is $0. That is expected because every dollar that we receive will be allocated out to the various park and preserve tax funds that we just went over. If you move down to the revenues, we anticipate receiving about $26.9 million in 26-27. And then continue moving down that column. The first allocation in 26-27, and this is reflected on the slide as well, it will be to pay with a debt on the Westworld drainage projects of about $600,000. After that, 10% of what's remaining will be allocated to the fire mitigation fund. That's about 2.6. 51% to the park improvements fund, about 13.4 million. 14% to the park maintenance, 3.7 million. 7% to the police park rangers fund, 1.8 million. And then finally, 18% to the preserve maintenance fund, or $4.7 million. Then at the bottom of page B30, again, we project there will be a $0 ending balance since every dollar will be allocated to one of the purposes listed up on the slide there. I believe that's the end of the allocation fund. Unless there are any questions, we can proceed to talk about the individual funds. Could we go to the next slide?
Commissioner Stevens.
Just real quick, it sounds like council had some ability to reallocate. Is there any opportunity here if more indirect cost allocation is done into the consuming elements that are part of the park reserve that might create some more flexibility in other elements of the general fund?
Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair Stevens, my understanding is that the allocations of the park and preserve tax can be changed by council ordinance, but that is currently the allocation that is in the
Okay, so
most recently
just
passed
to
ordinance.
Commissioner Newman's comment, that was something that if there is some flexibility, that's something to be considered.
Commissioner Carla.
Just a little technical thing, it can only be changed by a supermajority vote of the council, not a regular 4-3 vote.
Because
Commissioner Newman.
I'm recognized, okay, good. Yeah, because I noticed in here, this was kind of intended, when we talked about this in last year, this was intended for maintenance, because maintenance was the big issue. I'm totally on board with that, but only about a third of this is going to maintenance. So it seems like the council wants to put it into some other things. That might be an area that we need to recommend to the council to restructure that, because if this is configurable, then the other discussion about should we be collecting taxes and putting them in a box that nobody can get to later is probably something we want to try and fix as a commission and as a council.
So, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I'd like to comment on, I think the 51% park improvements are the deferred maintenance on all the parks. So that is our a significant part of our maintenance as well.
Yeah, that was one of the big parts behind the Prop 490 was all taking care of all that deferred maintenance that we'd had for years. Commissioner Carla?
Yes, and a lot of the preserve maintenance and everything also includes invasive weeds control and a lot of fire mitigation, because there's fire mitigation that the fire department does and the TRT, the second TRT team, but then in the preserve maintenance, you also have additional fire mitigation.
Yes, and Chair Schweiker, members of the Budget Review Commission, I'd like to clarify that a little bit. As it relates to the allocations of the Parks and Preserve tax, the 51% for park improvements is for major capital infrastructure repair. So that is to make major repair and renovation to the aging parks in the entire city. So that'll be, the 51% is primarily capital. There are some maintenance-related improvements that might not be capitalized that would be captured in the 51%. And then the 14% allocation is strictly park maintenance. It is contractual, it's personnel, it is additional maintenance staff for our parks.
Thank you for the clarification.
Any more questions on that? Okay.
Okay, can we go to the next slide? We'll look at the first of the 5 park and preserve tax funds. The first is a park maintenance fund on page B31. We'll go in order in the book here. We talked about the revenue side on the previous slide. If you look at page B31 and move about 2/3 of the way down to the total operating budget line and start moving from left to right, you see that the adopted budget was $2.2 million last year. I should say $2.2 million in our current adopted budget. And then moving over to the gray column, the proposed budget is $3.3 million. That's a $1.1 million increase compared to the current year's adopted budget. There are a few highlights listed on the slide here. There are a total of 6.8 new FTE positions funded by this fund, park personnel, and predominantly, and then $0.3 million for about 5 vehicles that will be purchased for park maintenance, and then about $100,000 for some irrigation system improvements. Those are the major highlights from this fund. If there are any questions? If not, could we advance to the next slide? Could we advance to the next slide? Thank you. Next is the Preserve Maintenance Fund on page B32 that receives an 18% allocation of the Park and Preserve tax after the WIFA debt that we discussed earlier. The total operating budget line, again, about 2/3 of the way down. The actuals for the operating budget were 0 in fiscal year 24-25. In the adopted budget, they're $3.1 million. And in the proposed, it's $3.4 million, an increase of about $300,000. Just a few highlights here on the slide for this fund, about $300,000 for the various preserve maintenance initiatives, and then $100,000 for a couple of vehicles to be used for preserve maintenance. Could we go to the next slide? Next is the Police Park Rangers Fund. That's on page B33. The operating budget for this fund, again, was 0 in fiscal year 24-25, no actuals, but there's a $1.3 million budget in the current year in the adopted budget, and $1.4 million in the proposed budget. Very small increase. Nothing really major going on in this fund in fiscal year 26-27 in terms of increases or changes. Could we advance? Next is the Fire Mitigation and Technical Rescue Fund. That's on page B34 if you're following along in the budget book. The total operating budget in the current fiscal year is $1.8 million in the adopted budget, and proposed is 1.7. The net reduction of about $100,000 is due to the removal of some one-time capital purchases along with a reduction in some contractual services, which offset the increases due to personnel. Could we go to the next slide?
Commissioner Newman.
Could you clarify, I saw this, what you sent out this afternoon, and I had already had the slides from the, I think, April 20th when you sent those out. On slides, well, 9, 11, and 12, the numbers are all the same, but the proposed highlights are not there, and there's some head count and things like that. Or have those details changed in the slides and in terms of what makes up that number?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Newman, nothing has changed in terms of the highlights. It seems that the slides that you're holding simply don't have the highlights.
That was
Oh,
removed
this doesn't
today.
have the highlights.
That was removed today, and I'm just curious as to why that was all taken off.
Yeah, I apologize. The version you have, we added some notes to them to talk about what those budgets support, but there was a miscommunication when Scott updated his section of the slides. We didn't connect the two. So those are still all relevant.
Those are all, so those previous
Yes.
comments are relevant?
Yes, all of those bullet points are
Because
relevant.
I mean, I do have questions about this. I mean, I know we want to do some things to have better protection of the preserves, better fire protection, things like that. I get all that. I'm curious as to what the options are here, because I'm looking at this and saying, okay, on slide 11, 6 sworn park rangers, a sergeant, a real-time crime center technician. I'll be interested to hear what that is. And then on slide 12, 3 captains and a wildland urban interface position. I'd like to understand that. And so the details here, I mean, this seems like new headcount that I don't know if these are intense positions or not, but it seems like these incremental to our police and fire capabilities, because let's face it, the preserves are not an intense area. Yes, if you have a fire or whatever, it's all hands on deck. Or if there's an emergency, there's all hands on deck. But are there ways to cover that either through technology or through incremental arrangement of what resources we already have that would be less costly to do that? So that, I mean, I don't know if we can answer it here, but the details do matter on this in terms of why we're spending that money in that way.
Yeah,
City Manager Caton.
Yeah, thank you. We'll have Chief Shannon here start us off, and Chief Leduc probably on deck here in a minute. So we'll start off with the fire thing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Great question. The specific answer to your question is the 3 captains had been dedicated well before 490 was passed, focusing primarily on the wildland urban interface, that NEOS area, which is it is the wick, if you will, to the preserve. And so if we don't address fuel management and prevention services in that area, that's probably our biggest vulnerability, because we have mostly human starts.
You also discussed that as a part of the ordinance development
Yes.
to go into NAOS areas. I remember that.
Yes, sir. And then the fuel mitigation position is going to be a precision position that will help facilitate all the funds, because you've noted that there are dedicated funds for fuel mitigation in a lot of the city's departments, and that person will essentially be the czar of fuel mitigation in the city. We didn't have that position before. We haven't expended those funds because we haven't hired that person just yet. It's been quite a recruitment process, and so we expect to see that all come to fruition in this next budget year.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions, Commissioner Newman?
No, when I see a lot of headcount being added to areas that are open spaces and things, I get the fire mitigation thing, the discussion. I just want to be sure that we're properly leveraging the resources we already have in place, because half our budget is police and fire, so it seems like we should be able to leverage that as much as possible.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thank you for that.
And
So-
technology.
Absolutely. And so my understanding of the intent, it was to add staff. And when we go back to our additions of the positions for next year, we have mostly with 22 positions related to the ambulance. I'll quickly move that aside. And then the next was really related to 490 was the majority of the remainder. So have Chief Leduc take it.
Chairman and commissioners, it is important to note that what this fund does is support 6 officers, preserve officers, as well as 1 supervisor, and then a technician to support it, which is a position that actually supports it through drones. Most of the calls for service that we have in the preserve in our park system are missing hikers or people with medical incidents, so drones have become very valuable. So that includes what's called a real-time crime technician, drone pilot. But it's also important to note that these employees not only are assigned to the preserve, but all of the parks within the city. And so we have hundreds and hundreds of acres of not only preserve, but parks that they need to patrol. And it's a very specialized, requires specialized training beyond what our normal patrol officers get when you're talking about search and rescue and different equipment that they have to utilize to ensure the safety of everybody recreating in those parks.
I would, Mr. Chair, just briefly add, I think this is a good example of how Scottsdale is different from many other communities. Sometimes there are behaviors that occur within the park system that are undesirable, and so it's not by happenstance that we get to enjoy our parks. It's by strategy that we resource it. So thank you for the question.
Yeah, I appreciate the question too, and I'll just add a little bit of context. When we did go through the process of evaluating the tax before it went to the voters, public safety in the parks was one of the highest priorities that our residents had for use of the tax. And we did specify that we would expand the park ranger system so there would be dedicated resources within the parks and the preserve to address some of the issues that we've seen in parks that are common to parks, but our citizens felt very strongly about that being a centerpiece of the tax when we went through that process.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Okay, can we scroll to the next slide, please? Sorry, one more, number 13. The final fund we're going to look at for the Park and Preserve tax is the Park Improvements Fund. This is the fund that receives 51% of the Park and Preserve tax revenue after the WIFA debt. This equates to about $13.4 million in revenue in fiscal year 26-27. Looking at the operating budget on the slide, there was, in the adopted budget, $2.7 million. In the proposed, it's about $2 million. And then looking at transfers out to the CIP, $5 million in the adopted budget, and then another $4.8 in 26-27. A few highlights, about $300,000 for the replacement of park furnishings. And then the transfers to CIP include some funding for some sport court replacements, El Dorado Aquatic and Fitness Center, some design for improvements at Chaparral Park, Agua Linda Park, Paiute Park, and then the Indian Bend Wash Master Plan. If there are any questions about the Park Improvements Fund?
Commissioner Lettieri.
Yes. Question is line 3 on the beginning fund balances, park improvement fund balance. What's driving that exponential growth from 3 million to 49 million?
Chair Schweiker, Commissioner Lettieri, really it's the same fundamental process that we're going through with the rest of our capital plan, and you'll see even a small reduction where we've reduced the amount because all of our money, not all of our money, but the majority of our expenses for the upcoming 26-27 fiscal year will be for design. As it relates to the sales tax, it is a pay-as-you-go tax. So for us to complete major capital, for us to pay for a $30 million investment in, let's say, Vista or El Dorado Parks, we have to collect that revenue as we go. So we'll see periods where we don't have as many expenses, and then we'll see really large capital expenses in certain fiscal years in the 5-year plan.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so we're done with the Parks and Preserve tax now. Now we go on to the other funds, which is the aviation, the stadium fund, the risk management fund, debt service fund, PC replacement fund, and special district fund. We put those under there, lumped them all together. Most of them are pretty self-explanatory, but rather than go through each one of those, we'll just discuss them if anybody has any questions about any of them. Commissioner Stevens.
I just have one question. It's on slide 22 for the risk management fund, close to $20 million. And I think that's page B24. My question is, were these numbers also reviewed by the Lost Trust Fund Commission, the expense numbers, or do they just look at the reserve that you have for the claims? And because you do have a reserve for claim estimates and IBNR, I believe also. He didn't think he was going to have to say anything, I'll bet.
I was hoping. Thank you, Commissioner. Vice Chair George Woods, Safety and Risk Management Director. Yes, our Lost Trust Fund Board reviews our reserves as well as our fund balances. We do meet a minimum of 3 times per week, and we do seek guidance from an actuary to help us, to guide us, in terms of how we set our reserves.
Okay, and then so the expenses here, like 6 million or so was premiums. Is that really premiums? Because you're self-insured for a lot of this too. Or is this workers' comp and then it's also other litigation type claims, slip and falls, stuff like that?
Yes, so the Chairman, the insurance that the city purchases covers, or we try to cover, all the exposures presented to a municipality. And so when you see the insurance premium line item, that is indicative of casualty and property, workers' compensation, aviation, crime, cyber liability. There's a caveat of insurance coverages that we purchase. To your point, insurance premiums have increased significantly over the past couple of years. We are working with our brokers, and we have consulted the city manager in terms of, in the future, examining and analyzing the city's opportunity to go into a captive market, which would help control those insurance premium costs.
Okay, and have you thought of going somewhat self-insured on it with a stop-loss cap like you do in some of the other areas?
Yes, so the city is self-insured for the first $2 million of each loss. In terms of workers' compensation, we are self-insured for the first $1 million. We've done a great job in our property damage coverage. We've gotten that deductible down to $100,000. And so if we ever have a large property damage loss in the city, which we had one a couple years ago with the garbage trucks up at the North Courtyard, we are only subject to a $100,000 deductible. We are also working with the water department to secure flood insurance to offset the deductible that's associated with the buildings up there, try to bring that down from $100,000 down to $25,000.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'll just take the opportunity, as you can tell from my colleague, Mr. Woods, we hired one of the best in the business. We spend a lot of time in this area. We have a lot of risk. Again, we have the best working for us. We've already started talking about the next, the captive model that he referenced, and likely will return a year from now and lay that out a little bit more if we want to pursue that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you.
So do we have any questions about any of these other funds that anybody wants to discuss? I don't see any, so I would say we move on to item number 3, which is discuss the observations and recommendations on the proposed 26-27 budget and CIP and the commission report to council. We do have a request to speak on this one from Betty Janik, so I would invite Betty to come up and make her comments. Okay.
Hello, my name is Betty Janik, and I want to say hello to all the commissioners and to all the staff that I see here today. First slide is a picture of the first page of the 2025-2030 strategic plan. I was on Scottsdale City Council when this was voted in. It is a wonderful plan. It plans for Scottsdale's future, and it will continue to be a wonderful plan. I would like to speak about 2 aspects of the plan that are under consideration for being removed. Next slide, please. One of the initial pages showed the strategic initiatives. Number 1 was to continue the advanced purified recycled water plan. And I've highlighted recycled water is critical to Scottsdale drinking water supply. It can fill the gap between what we need and what we have. The next one I wanted to pay attention to is number 4, pursue additional future water resources. And right there is ensure a long-term and sustainable water supply. These supplies include, but are not limited to, SRP's new Bartlett Dam discussion. Our Bartlett Dam has been in existence for 87 years. These are very, very long-term plans. And yes, they are very expensive. But this is what will propel us into the future to be a sustainable city. Next slide, please. I then looked at more detail, and you guys are real familiar with that based on everything I've heard today, and why in 2027, 2 of the very important guidelines will be expiring. One of them is the interim guideline that was established in 2027 where we left water in the reservoir and we got water credits. The other one is the 2019 drought contingency plan, and both of those expire within the next year. We are at the bottom of the heap, the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to water rights, because we were the last ones to enter into draws from the Colorado River. Now, the next slide is the one that concerns me the absolute most. Go down to the graph, please. Or up to the graph, I guess. Thank you. Okay, this graph was published 1 week ago. It shows the water content of our reservoirs. It starts with the end of last year, and it is continuing to a week ago. The green line is the 62-year average flow into our reservoirs. The blue line, the jagged blue line, is the actual flow, and at the end is the predicted flow into our reservoirs, which we depend upon for Colorado River water. It is currently at 22% of average. And if it continues as we expect it to continue, it will be the lowest runoff in the history of measuring water runoff. And that concerns me. That concerns me. Now, again, in the near future, we have water credits. We have water credits that will carry us over for a couple of years because our water department was smart enough to bank any extra Colorado River water. Okay. Then the next thing, this is the new budget, 2026-27. And I noticed that the Bartlett Dam was pulled, and I noticed that the advanced purified recycled water was pulled. Now, purified water, why do we need to keep that in? I was told I could go a little bit over, I asked. I'll be quick, I'm almost done. Okay, why do we want the recycled water? Number one, it's our water, we don't have to buy it. Number two, we can get it in about 3 to 5 years. And number three, we have the final regulations so that we can now proceed to actually produce water. The Bartlett Dam, the federal government's going to be paying for 50% of all the expenses and get 50% of the water. 22 other municipalities will share the remainder. If we take our Bartlett water money out of that budget, it is not a good look when the federal government looks at all the information and says, whoa, what is Scottsdale doing? We don't have to pay for it now. There is no bill now. There is really little risk to keeping it in the budget. But the biggest risk is, what if we get knocked out from those 22 municipalities? And
Thank you.
Nobody else is going to be allowed in because it's oversubscribed. Thank you.
Thank you. And there has been lots of discussion about water and the importance of it. And I think reasonable minds, when they come to the end of it, are going to realize that water is very important and we're going to have to deal with it. So thank you very much for those comments. Yeah, so City Treasurer has a quick presentation as we move on to item number 3.
So thank you, Chair, and members of the Commission. Before you dive into your discussions and recommendations, I just wanted to bring a few recaps. So next slide, please. Oops. Okay, so just wanted to recap for the Commission and for our audience the meeting's discussions to date. In December, the Commission looked at and discussed the financial conditions report, historical revenue trends, and quarterly budget and actual variances. In February, we looked at the preliminary 5-year capital improvement plan. In March, we looked at the preliminary general fund revenue forecast and also the next quarterly budget and actual variance. And the April meetings has been focused on the operating budgets by fund. Next slide. And these are the recommendations that have been voted on to date. I don't, not in particular order, but from the December meetings all the way to the April meetings. The recommendations summarized are including feasibility study for Granite Reef Senior Center, restoring the APRW project in the capital improvement plan once the cost studies are complete, reporting on financial sustainability of 5-year CIP in light of the methodology change to exclude project completion costs when projects are not fully scoped. Next slide. developing realistic contingency plans for the vulnerable residents, especially seniors, and determine the impact of reductions in federal funding and resulting impact on general fund, look at impact of federal funding cuts on Paiute Community Center, review the city's tax rates to see if current tax rates are proportioned and provides long-term fiscal financial sustainability for the various needs of the city. And then evaluate sufficiency of the 2 million additional PSPRS contributions for fire, and if additional contributions are needed for police after the 2026 actuarial reports are released in December. Identify and take a closer look at aging facilities over the summer to ensure adequate funding for the 27-28 budget. Report on fund balances and reserve roll forward. Next slide. Okay, so we can go back to those slides. So these are all the recommendations that the commission has voted on. So if the commission wants to revisit any of these recommendations voted on to be included in the final report, we should do so. Otherwise, they are recommendations that are voted on, and they will be included in the final report to council. Can you go back to the slide? So if the commission would like to discuss these recommendations again, amend it or change it, it's up to the commission. Otherwise, they are included in the final report.
Commissioner Newman.
Just a question. I received some information that about Paiute, and a question about that, and maybe the city manager can clarify. If I'm not mistaken, that facility, part of it's rented out. Is that correct? And so my question would be, why would we spend, if it's mostly rented out, or I don't know what the utilization is, so I don't know the answer, but you can imagine where my mind goes, if most of it is rented out, why would we do a lot of renovations to it, and if it's not being utilized?
So, Mr. Chair and Commissioner, my understanding, so it is a bond issue. It is a 2019 bond item that we have to address, and so we were going to do a feasibility study to address that question. I think it is, my understanding, it's under lease and full. So it's occupied, so it's not vacant. I think part of what I would anticipate with the feasibility is, are we fixing up the existing or are we building new? Those are two totally different, and I think the feasibility will flush that out from my perspective.
Just we're through a mandate, we're taking on debt to renovate a rented out facility. So that, surely that's part of the feasibility discussion.
I'm seeing my colleague, I'm seeing a commissioner interested in jumping in this conversation. You have asked some good questions there. I look forward to adding once my colleague chimes in. Deputy City Manager Kira Peters.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, commissioners. And I was under the impression that the feasibility study was actually for Paiute Neighborhood Center in this upcoming fiscal year, $250,000 instead of Granite Reef.
Yeah, so just to add to that, that's mine. So
Commissioner
all my
Carla?
comments were related to that. I think we just have an air slide, but yeah, it's by you.
Okay.
Commissioner Carla.
Yes, and you guys kind of jumped ahead, because when we did the recommendation, look at the impact of federal funding cut on Paiute, and then we have the bullet above it about the contingency plan for the vulnerable residents, and then the city manager put the feasibility study for Paiute back in the budget. So in reality, the bullet about Paiute probably isn't needed, because you're looking at the funding, you know, that part on this other bullet, if hopefully that stays in there. And I will caveat all this in saying, if anybody tries to take out that bullet, then I want Paiute back in there. But because the feasibility study is in the budget now, and it's looking at it'll look at what you talked about also, it does seem like a duplication.
Yep.
So is that a motion to remove that particular item?
Well, once I'm sure that the above bullet stays in.
Mr. Chair, if I may, just kind of walk through it a little bit.
Yes.
I was going off recollection, not quite aligning, so I want to go back to Commissioner Newman's comments. If they were, Granite Reef, we're going to do feasibility, but internal, kind of a staff analysis.
Right.
So just to put that aside, so Granite Reef, bond issue there, or bond item, but we're going to do some internal, don't need any dollars for an outsource. We're going to do some work internally, kind of an internal feasibility. So there's that situation. And then to Commissioner Carler's point, we did add feasibility for Paiute Community Center, Neighborhood Center, whatever we're referring to that. And then independent, was this emerging issue of vulnerable residents and loss of some funding. We did provide a memo which got some feedback, but can continue to have dialogue. I would just remind the committee on that there is a $15 million economic dip, but for lack of a better term, or economic loss line item to the tune of $15 million. That gives council, policymakers flexibility should mid-budget year some revenue loss. Revenue loss is really the title. If we have a revenue loss, whether it be federal funds or whether it be a sales tax, we approach policymakers and say, here's this situation. Do you want to stop the service because the support of the money is stopping, or do you want to supplement it with our own dollars? So just pointing out that flexibility within the budget, should that situation arise.
Thank you. Commissioner Carla?
Yeah, to kind of wrap it up, and if we keep the bullet in about develop the realistic contingency fund for most vulnerable residents, especially in the face of the federal cuts, that covers, it covers what Commissioner Newman always talks about policy, because it would be council's decision. My whole point is we need to get it out there realistically, because yes, you put out the memo about LIHEAP, but it's not real. That's not what's happening on the ground to the folks who get it. And I know it sounds good, but there's no certainty whatsoever. So if we keep this bullet in here and look at this holistically and policy-wise, and then take out this one about Paiute because you're already doing the feasibility study, that would be my double recommendation. I move that we keep the top bullet on the page, develop realistic contingency plan, et cetera, and remove the one that says look at impact of federal funding cuts on Paiute Community Center, because it's a duplicate.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Otherwise, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Yeah. Yeah, it does. It does. Are there any other recommendations we've had up here on the board that anyone wants to revisit or modify? Commissioner Stevens.
Yeah, I'd like to have just a real quick discussion among this group, because we've never done it. I get really confused about, when's it my job to say you should add something back into CIP if I don't know enough about the whole situation? Or am I just supposed to be looking at the projects and how they've put them in there? Like on the advanced water situation, I don't have an opinion necessarily on that. I've toured the place, it's pretty cool, but I don't know enough about water to know whether that belongs in there or if that's a waste of money and there's other solutions that are available for procuring water. So I just struggle with what our role is and whether or not should we be jumping in and understanding what's going on with water? But if I say that, I don't think any of these people in the room are going to let me do that, to understand what's really going on with water, to make an intelligent discussion. So
The city manager may want to talk to that, but I believe that we had a pretty in-depth discussion about water and what the various alternatives were, and I think the manager may want to talk about that just for a minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to talk about this. This has certainly garnered a lot of discussion, and I appreciate that. We're in a significant drought. It's been a tough year in snow country, and so it's good for us to discuss. I would try to keep my remarks short on a very complex topic and say it this way. For the two projects that have received significant community discussion or discussion. One, the Bartlett Dam. And I look up at that, and it was $25 million and some change. And so what happens, and if that's for 26, 27, as it was, then we have to cover those. We have to cover those with rates. And there's no project for $26 million for Bartlett Dam. So it's really a ghost project that hypes up rates. There's no project for Bartlett Dam for next year for $25+ million. So if I have it in there, then we have to cover it with rates. That would increase rates to an amount that is not needed. So we are under feasibility study right now, and we're part of a membership with 19 other agencies And so we pay our feasibility study amount. We're continue to be a partner in this. And there will be a significant dollar amount. We don't know that dollar amount. And so when that, in the feasibility study, so we moved it to the operating. There's been a lot of discussion whether it's in the operating or in the capital and what. So it's in the operating budget to continue to pay our portion of the feasibility study. So that's Bartlett. It's been discussed. I wanted to reiterate that. And really the effects that it has on rates. Because if it were in next year, then we'd have to cover that. To that point, the AWP. So AWP, a year ago, ADEQ, there's double acronyms there. So Arizona Department of Environmental Quality changed the rules. We know that. And so then we embarked upon a study to understand, based upon the direction from this group. So we listened to this group. And it said 67 million. The prior to that, it said 15 to 20 million. This group said, you increased it to 67 million. You should look at this. We did what you told us to do. We looked at it and are looking at it. So we looked at the capital side. The capital side came back in 2025 dollars, $100 million. $100 million, and that's 10 MGD, million gallons a day. So then it's upwards of 150 million, push more if you do 20 million MGD a day. So we're exploring that. But then we have the operating costs. The operating costs are significant. That we continue to evaluate what that looks like. We expect that over the next 6 to 9 months. We will present that to our policymakers and say, here's option A. Option A, in no particular order, option A is new source and supply. We have some opportunities to acquire some new water. That fits the portfolio. Option B could be AWP, let's just call it pure water. It's had a number of names, that's the latest and greatest, and so pure water. So pure water, and so the $100 million that we have proposed in 27, 28 give us the flexibility. And by the way, there is $100 million worth of expenditures, so we had to back it up with $100 million in revenue. So guess what? We have a debt issuance expected to the tune of $100 million to balance out that expenditure. And so over the next 6 to 9 months, we will return to City Council, say here are at least 2 options, here are multiple options, and then this budget allows that type of discussion and opportunity. And at that time, we will have a complete picture. We've never had a complete picture. We will have a complete picture based upon capital expenditures and operating expenditures. Mind you, also, Arizona Department of Environmental Quality rules are changing, or the potential to change. So we are in this very fluid environment, and what this budget does as proposed is only proposed. The existing budget is adopted by City Council, so this is just discussion until the policymakers, and we have the discussion and the policymakers approve based upon discussion and input from you, 26, 27 budget. So back to ADEQ, I don't want to build, I'll just use the numbers because it's really important. Right now, in 2025 dollars, it's $100 million for a 10 MGD plant. In 2028 dollars, it's $150 million. If they change those rules, I just use the $100 million. If they change those rules, because we had 67. Before that, remember, he had 15 to 20 million. So we expected 15 to 20 million. They changed the rules. The 67 was kind of a holdover. We went out and tested it, and it's 100 million now. If we're able to slide those rules down a little bit, maybe it ends up being 80 million. Based upon those rules, we're going to build a plant. The rules are in flux. I don't want to overbuild the plant to the tune of 100 million, and we needed 80 million. That passes on higher rates to the ratepayers. That's the situation we're in. So this budget, as proposed, allows the flexibility for the policymakers to make that decision when we have more information. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Carla and then Commissioner Newman.
Okay. I will point out first that we have moved from zombie projects to ghost projects, so we're making a little progress here. No, the ADEQ, that is frustrating, and I completely understand that. What I want to make sure of is 2 things. We have a recommendation to restore the line item for the APRW project in the CIP once all these costs are fully known. And so my question to you is, if the BRC makes that recommendation to council, you anticipate that this is something that will be discussed at this work study so you can get the policy direction? And before, months ago, when we talked about this, we had said maybe a work study in 4 months, but now we're talking 6 to 9 months. So it will, in effect, be next budget where this happens. So I just wanted to ask for clarity on that timing. And then the final question, so I can turn the floor over to somebody else, is Councilwoman Janik talked about the fact that we do need to have a certain commitment in the budget for the Bartlett capital costs, and you're saying that we don't really. So just ask, how is that determined? Are any of the other 21 communities, are they keeping a line item for capital in their budgets? I mean, I am trying to understand if we are gonna lose our place, and you've assured us before we're not, but I'm just trying to understand how that works. So that's basically 3 questions.
How many questions with 3 parts? Just joking.
Yeah.
And so.
Altogether 12.
Actually, so, Mr. Chair, committee members, let me introduce my colleague, Senior Interim Director of Water Resources, David Walby.
Commissioners, good afternoon. So yes, to your question, I'll get specifically for other utilities. I have seen it both ways. Some do have it in CIP. I think that's evident to some of the communities, and some others do not. So as this moves forward, the evaluation, the feasibility study for Bartlett specifically, once they have a plan in place and it's settled, they will give us time to include monies back into CIP as they move forward for part of their process to build the dam. They have to go through what's called the NEPA process. And so that process includes a financial component. And when they do get to, and we're one of the committee members on that, of one of the 22, then we will have to be able to show that at that particular time, that we do have the CIP funding, the financial backing to be able to provide the funding for raising Bartlett Dam. But we don't need that today in CIP to be reflective for that process. So we'll need to wait to get through that feasibility study first, and then once we have those hard dollars and costs that they will provide back to us, then the second part of that is to make sure that when they do their financial evaluation, we can demonstrate and show that capability.
So the regional participation agreement that we have, that we are paying into for the feasibility study now, there's nothing that says that the people who keep an accruing amount in their capital get a higher percentage or anything of water. And then the second part is, so in effect, we're not going to have the capital for Bartlett till the feasibility and the process is done, and then we're gonna get a big number?
That's hard to say as it relates to a big number, because they'll break that project over a number of years to build. So I don't know how they're gonna structure that, if they're gonna require all those dollars to be shown in one particular year, or is it gonna be broken out over a 10-year build? And that's what we're hearing now, is approximately 10 years to build the dam. So are they gonna be asking for all that up front, or is that gonna be broken over a 10-year period? That I'm not sure and clear on right now, but we'll have to wait to see. But
it's guaranteed we don't lose our
we
seat
won't-
at the table for a full percentage?
No, it is not based on dollars set aside in the capital that gets us kind of in line, I think, as to what you're,
Yeah.
no.
The other thing, if I may go back to the first part of the, thank you, go back to the first part of the comment about AWP. I was remiss in my passionate explanation to also illustrate that this project was a casualty of, it had dollars for 25, 26, but they were not spent. So again, the way we're doing is actually very transparent, which brings out the questions. I appreciate that. So many times what we have is a project that's funded and there's no work done on it, and it's just kind of funded and it just has this life. And so therefore that was the first step. It was consistent with the other projects, and then as we were regrouping. So I just wanted to mention that, and then circle back to Commissioner Member Stevens' questions. I think from my perspective, This is the exact role, or one of the roles of the Budget Review Commission. You hear, you have questions, community members have questions, and it's our job to be able to answer those, and I use the word defend them. And so I actually, even though, again, I get passionate about answering it, because I feel like we followed a set path, and I'm extremely proud about what the team has developed and is presented. And so it's your right to ask those, and it's my obligation to be able to answer them. And so I'm very comfortable in that. Thank you for the opportunity for me to explain, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Newman.
I was just going to underscore what City Manager Caton just said. A couple of weeks ago, Carla, you put through a motion directing staff to do something. We're not directing, requesting staff put certain things back in the budget just so we would see a number there, and I voted no against it. Here's why. He said, City Manager Caton has said on 3 occasions now, here's the plan I'm putting together. I'm going to bring 4 or 5 options together. We don't know what they are just yet. I've done a lot of construction projects. The first year or so of projects on this scale, you don't see much. It's all paper. It's all analysis. It's all discussion with people and coordination. And we're now putting ourselves here in the position of being the project managers rather than the Budget Review Commission. And I'd ask that we step back and have a little bit of trust in our city manager and our head of water to make the right decisions. I agree with everything Betty Janik said. We need water. We need the advanced water. We need a dam. But we need to get the dam right. We need to get the water right. And because there's nothing more expensive than the wrong project. And then they become zombie projects, and now you got them hanging around your neck for tens, even hundreds of millions of dollars. So I would ask that we step back, let them do their work, be patient, and I trust that they're going to do their job. And that's why I voted no a couple of weeks ago.
Commissioner Carla.
And I understand your explanation, and if this wasn't such a heavily discussed topic, but if you look at the actual motion, it says, in effect, what the city manager has said, that once all the costs are in and we know what we're talking about, then restore it to the budget. And I just think that based on all the community feedback on this, that if we make that statement, it's important for the BRC to make that statement. You know, not just, well, we'll wait and we'll wait, because the reality is that once all these cost studies come in, there's going to be the work study with council, and council's going to give direction. But this is such an important topic and such an important thing for our city and future part of our budget that I think it is fair for the BRC to stick with this recommendation, because we are all in a way saying the same thing, but this way the BRC is on record with making a commitment. And so I will respectfully disagree.
And let me say, so far, I've not heard a motion to take that out of the, of our recommendations, so.
And our disagreement is on record, so.
Yeah. On to something new, Commissioner Stevens.
Well, no, we're not onto something new. Because the reason I asked that initial question is I'm struggling with what business we have making certain recommendations if there isn't enough information out there to make a definitive statement. The way this recommendation is worded, once the cost estimate comes in and it says it's $700 billion, that means we recommend that they go ahead and do it. So my thought for a compromise would be that the BRC recognizes the importance and the severity of the current water situation and acknowledges that this and Bartlett Dam may be solutions, however, are not in a position to specifically ask that they be added back in. The point is more, they may likely be solutions, but I'm uncomfortable recommending them without knowing the cost and what's going to happen. And I'm actually more interested in what Treasurer Andrews is going to have to do, because somebody's got to be planning for whatever these costs are going to be and how they're going to be paid for. So that's another question. So it looks like I'm sure Commissioner Carla wants to talk now, but I would ask if we can consider changing it to we are supportive of products that are economically feasible, such as blank and blank, but do not suggest that they be added in the 5-year plan right now.
Commissioner Carla and then Commissioner Newman, you had more? Okay. Maybe.
Well, with all due respect to Commissioner Stevens, you're the one who said a month ago that we're not really doing anything. And if we go by your logic, then we're doing even less. And I'll point out that there's another recommendation that says, once the figures are in on the PSPRS, evaluate if we need to make additional payments. So, but by your logic, we don't get to have that recommendation either. I think we take the information we have and we say, this is the intent. And if we're not gonna do that, then I agree with you, we're not really doing anything. But based on all the months of discussion we've had on this, it seems legitimate to say, this is an important project. When we have the costs, let's put it back in the budget. But I have a due compromise. I mean, could we say, instead of restore APRW project once the costs are in, evaluate restoring? And then you're just adding one word and adding an ing on the other, and you're in effect hitting your point. It's similar to the one on PSPRS, yet it stays in the recommendations.
So I believe this was originally Carla's recommendation. So if Carla's making this a friendly amendment to her own recommendation, how do people feel about that?
I support it.
Yeah, so,
Okay, I would
want to make a
move
motion?
that the recommendation, which originally said restore APRW project and CIP once cost studies are complete, be modified to evaluate restoring APRW project and CIP once cost studies are complete.
Is there a second to that motion? Okay, so the motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Yeah, I feel bad. I don't know if Skylar's voting or not because we've been having problems with his audio, so I'm not hearing anything from that, but it sounds to me like it was adopted unanimously. And I think, this is good. This is why we have these discussions going back and forth. So it's really good to have us all here and talking about this. And I really appreciate everybody's openness to be willing to look at what we did and make modifications and come out with something that we think is workable. And I also believe, these projects are going to take decades. So, regardless of what council's around now or in 10 years, I am confident the city of Scottsdale will make sure that when we turn our taps on, water's going to come out of them. And it's going to be, I saw this morning where city of Corpus Christi just, I think either last night or tonight, they're mandating a mandatory 25% water cut on everybody because they're running out of water. So this is not Scottsdale alone. Yeah, they live on the ocean, and this is a nationwide problem. So I am confident that the city in the future will make sure that we have tap water. And we all know, what, down the road, let's not kid ourselves. We always think of turning on tap water as being free. It's not going to be free in the future. It may not be like gasoline, but the city will recover what it costs to give us our water, and individuals will make a lot of decisions on how they choose to do it. But, I appreciate the way that the city is looking at these things. Thank you. So these are the other recommendations we've had up there. Is there anything else that anybody wants to discuss, or anything from the discussions we had about funds today that people want to make new recommendations? And by the way, also, just so people know, we may all have things that don't get voted on or we don't get them in. Every commissioner is free, of course, to email the city with their recommendations. They can't hold themselves out to be part of the BRC, but just as a representative, anybody is free, if they are on the losing end of any votes, to write an email to all the council and say, hey, this is something that I think you should do or look at. So are there any more additions on things that we looked at today?
Are we talking about new things or things that are already on the slides?
Well, either one, either things that are on the
I
slides
sent
or,
some in this afternoon.
okay,
We'll pull yours up.
okay. All right, so we'll pull up.
Do I have the floor?
You have the floor, Commissioner Newman. Commissioner Lettieri.
I want to address the treasurer. Commissioner Newman's first recommendation, isn't that your normal process when you're preparing the budget to look at revenue and expense and allocate? Isn't that what Commissioner Newman is recommending? Isn't that a normal budget process?
Chair Schweiker, members of the commission, actually, I believe Commissioner Newman is recommending that we look at the proportionality of our tax. So we have a 1.7% tax. 1% goes to the general fund, 0.1% is, and the rest of the allocations are by voter approval. 0.1% is restricted for public safety. Another 0.1% is restricted for the arterial life cycle program. A 0.2% is restricted for transportation. A 0.15% is restricted for parks and preserve, maintenance and improvements. And the last 0.15% is restricted for the preserve, the old preserve debt service. So I believe what he's saying is that we may be collecting too much in the 0.15 for this restriction and maybe collecting too little money in the 0.1 for that restriction or the 0.2 for the transportation restriction. So we ought to look at the whole allocation of the 1.7 and whether it's being used correctly or adequately.
I understand that. And you're saying you don't?
No, currently our budget follows the restriction that's required.
Yeah, they just look at the way those taxes are laid out and everything, but they don't look at whether or not they're laid out in such a way that they really should be, because we've discussed before that, let's be realistic, that 0.1% for streets is not nearly, it doesn't really, I mean, that's the one I think we're thinking of when you talk about a structural deficit in the amount raised. So I think it's just let's take a step back and look at these all together, that 1.7%, and figure out if the buckets are in the right place. Now, you know, this is fraught with legal questions and policy questions and all kinds of things, but I find it intriguing. Commissioner Carla, did you have something you wanted to add?
Unless Commissioner Lettieri wanted to follow up.
No.
Okay, all right. Yes, I also find, number one, the sales tax structure very interesting. And I think that's something that if we simplify it and turn it into a recommendation, that's very valid, you know, because, but again, knowing that legal will have to say, well, what has to go out, you know, what can be changed, what can't be changed, what are the rules as to how it can be changed, because I think it's going to be pretty complicated.
And that would be part of the evaluation.
Yeah, but I think, you know, that is, I think it's very valid. I'm going to skip to number 3 and save the preserve for last. Number 3, the bond mandate, looking at it, I think if the parking garage discussion taught us anything, it's maybe we should look after all this time. Because if the project is still valid, it's going to be valid.
It'll be fine.
But it's been so long, a lot of it because of COVID, the prices have changed so much, a lot of it because of COVID and now oil, that, you know, so I could support 1 and 3, definitely.
And just a clarification, this only is in the use of the remaining funds that have been unspent because it's debt. And I have trouble putting debt when you're made decisions 7 years ago and people blindly just go forward. Now, I'm not saying people are making bad decisions or any, but it seems like there may be projects in there that might need some reevaluation.
Yeah, and this is 2019 bond.
The 2019
budget,
bond, yes.
So we probably need to clarify that. But again, that's a legal question too. You know, it would probably, I assume, have to go out to a vote of the people again since the people approved it. I don't know for sure on that one. Now, going back.
But that's where he's saying before next budget year, we would look at that. So there's plenty of time to.
So I do wanted to clarify that. We just looked it up. We have, of the 319 million bond authority, we have spent about 150 million to date. And that doesn't include any commitments that we have. So we have commitments that we've already made contracts we've already entered into, just haven't spent the money yet. So, but we could certainly look at what's remaining to be spent and some of the projects that are maybe in the outer years, that if the commission wants to look at those.
Commissioner,
Probably add that to the motion.
And just a
clarify.
clarification is, I'm not saying not do the projects, but I don't think we necessarily know. We're going, everybody's doing what voters said, but do voters still want that? I'm not sure.
And my question would be, based on what the treasurer just said, is at what point in time on the ones that are moving forward, and Allison, I'm sure knows this cold, is do we have to fish or cut bait? I mean, between now and then, I'm sure many more are going to be committed, or we're going to be at a certain point in a contract where you can't back down. So this would be extremely flexible as to what's left that could be looked at.
and I believe that the way he wrote this is extremely flexible.
Yeah. But I'm just pointing that out, that it's
It's
going to
just an
happen.
evaluation. of it.
Commissioner Stevens, you had a comment, I believe.
Yeah, actually, I like all three of these, but I've got a question. I want to know if Commissioner Newman, and ideally someone else if possible, but if, for now, Commissioner Newman is going to be able to meet with Treasurer Andrews and possibly any other relevant people to understand their output of being responsive to this comment so that when it comes back to this group, it is what he intended. Because my fear is if he can't engage with you or some of the staff in order to make sure you're responsive to this, you're going to come back with your best guess, and we're not going to get what we need to go forward. So that's my question. In doing this, is he going to be able to meet with you and whomever else to get the information necessary and to see that your presentation would be responsive?
Yes, we'll make sure we work with Commissioner Newman to make sure the information is accurate.
And he would be able to meet with people other than you?
We will have to comply with open meeting laws, so we will have to determine how those.
But, and I know he can't direct, he can't make legal decisions, but is he able to ask questions as you're putting your presentation together to see if it's being responsive? Can he say, I think you, this motion are also expected that we would have blank, blank, and blank in the presentation?
Chairman Schweiker and members of the commission, as we have discussed repeatedly, we have to comply with the open meeting law. So you can get information from staff members. You can ask, hey, Sonia, I need this information. That's not a problem. But deliberations, as set forth in statute and all the body of law that addresses this, have to happen before the public. So if you're going to have analysis, questions, weighing options, looking at, hey, what do you think about this or that? The public has a right to view all of that. It's codified in statute, in law, and it's in our code, and that has to happen here as we've been doing it. I know we were talking a little bit about the scope of the recommendations, and what I would like to do is bring you back to your enabling statute in the city code. It specifies what your recommendations, the scope of what your recommendations are supposed to be for the council. And it's supposed to be that you're supposed to be making recommendations for the operating budget appropriations, the capital budget appropriations, and then budget policies that materially impact the operating and capital budgets. So that's what's in the code. So that's where we're kind of supposed to keep the scope of the recommendations.
Just a comment to that. I think what Commissioner Stevens is saying, I agree with what you're saying, but I think it's even a little more tactical than that, is the output in achieving the spirit of what is here, as opposed to looking at options and all that stuff. Yes, that has to be done publicly, but just making sure that the question was understood and Treasurer Andrews and staff bring information, not just data, back to the council, I think is relevant. And there's reasonable interaction there, in my opinion. There's reasonable interaction just to make sure that, yeah, that meets what the spirit of this was. And that's not, I don't think that's outside of any open meeting law or anything, but if you start talking about options and optionality around that, I would agree with you on that.
So let me add to that. So Commissioner Newman can work with me as the staff liaison for this commission to make sure what I bring to the commission for consideration is what you're looking for. He cannot go and start talking to department staff and asking for specific analysis or all of that. He will work through me, and I will make sure that the information brought back, and I will coordinate with the city manager's staff to make sure the information brought back to the commission is relevant.
And so he can look at your presentation that you'll put together and let you know any areas that aren't responsive to what his request was. Because it'd be nice if I knew, because Brad, I don't fully understand everything you're doing here, but you know what? If the presentation comes back and you believe that it covers what you asked it to cover, I would love that, because that would save us a ton of time.
All I'm really asking here is go back to my original comment about give me your calendar and give me your checkbook. I'll tell you what your strategy is. What we're doing is different than what we're collecting. And I think this is an opportunity for us to really have a good, solid, real budget discussion here and align this, because there's a lot of structural things that are frustrating, have frustrated us in the past, because Bob, as you just asked, there are things that no matter what, that money has to go in that bucket and has to be used for something like that, and we may not intend that anymore. And I think it's important for us to kind of step back and say, do we need to have a bigger discussion as a community to make sure that those things are relatively aligned, so we don't end up in a corner where we got money that's sequestered that we just can't use anywhere because it's locked up in a mandate that nobody cares about anymore.
So Chairman Schweiker and Commissioner Newman, using your metaphor about the checkbook and the calendar, you can ask Sonia, I want the records for this date on the calendar. I want the invoices to support this entry in the checkbook. What you can't ask her outside of a public meeting is, how come this invoice is this amount and not this amount? Or, well, on this calendar date, I see that you met with City Manager Caton. Who else was there? It can't be that. It can be strictly information gathering. Any sort of analysis, opinion forming, any of that has to occur in the public meeting.
I don't see any problem being able to achieve that based on what the spirit of this is.
Commissioner Carla?
Okay, to sort of wind this up, because we still have to go over presentations. Again, I think 1 and 3 have validity, and everybody seems to be agreeing with that. Number 2, the preserve tax, the one from 2004. One clarification, it says, this may require a voter referendum to repurpose this revenue stream. This will require, because I helped write it, and it would require, because we wrote it specifically for a specific purpose, and it would have to go back to the voters.
But it doesn't require a voter referendum to do the evaluation.
No, but what I am saying is that on this particular one, there may be validity to this, but I think it's premature in 27, 28, because as Mr. Molinari said earlier, they're doing evaluations now, they're doing cost estimates on quite a few projects. Plus, the Preserve Commission has already started a process where staff is starting to evaluate, are there any outstanding issues tied to the Preserve Plan that we have not evaluated yet and we do not have in the pipeline for cost estimates. And one of those big ones is land acquisition, because there are 2,000 acres left up east of Pima, west of the power lines, south of Stagecoach, north of Dynamite, around Legend Trail going in an upside-down triangle, that can be bought with preserve tax dollars, this preserve tax. Now, it will be astronomically expensive, but what the commission is talking about is starting the process for the evaluation about should any of that land be considered for purchase. Now, because of the price, if the choice is, yes, we should consider some, and the commission goes to council in a work study, and council gives direction to look at it, then this would definitely push this off, by a couple of years. I'm not saying that the money's needed till 2034. I am saying that to evaluate the preserve tax in 27, 28 is premature, in particular because of the potential land acquisitions. So I would say that this one you should hold until next budget cycle, or you need to change the dates because you're not going to have the data you need to make the evaluation.
The proposal does not say at the end of the 28 budget cycle, 27, 28 budget cycle, the tax sunsets. It doesn't say that at all.
It says
It says,
to
what's the evaluation? Now, I've always supported buying land. That tax, that's what it was mostly for. So I completely agree with that. But if we're not going to buy land or we're not going to use it, now you're starting to sequester money in an area where those resources could be used elsewhere. And I'd like to remind everybody, we send 0.1% to roads and 0.3% to preserves. That's extraordinarily out of balance. Preserves and parks, 0.3%. So we have plenty of money coming in for preserves and parks if you're not buying land.
But the issue is that that's the big discussion that's going to start happening in the fall. So if you say
Let's
this
get on
for
with it.
27, 28,
Yeah.
it's premature. I'm just saying bump your time on this one so that we actually know the reality of potential
Well,
land
it
acquisition.
doesn't, and the end spirit of this is not to make a decision. I'm just saying, between now and the summer, the question is what are we going to do over the summer other than take vacation? So, hey, we can sit down and we can go through the evaluation. Certainly, we could get the evaluation done before the next cycle. That might say, hey, 2030 is when we need to sunset this because of this, that, and the other thing. That's fine. But we shouldn't be afraid of the evaluation in any way.
Well, again, I will respectfully disagree that I think the dates on number 2 are premature because you will not have the data. You will not have the costs.
You won't have the cost before next January of what the land costs or what you want to do?
No, on the decision, because what is happening right now is, and I don't know if Mr. Molinari wants to speak up about what the Preserve Commission's doing right now. They have literally just started the process to look at what other projects are still needed to complete the preserve plan.
We're getting in the weeds. Can I have the floor?
But if he wants to make this recommendation.
I just make a comment.
I'm gonna fight it.
This tax has been around since 2004. I would hope we know what to do with it.
Before we go further in this, we were scheduled to end in 5 minutes, which I don't think we're going to meet. I'd like to wrap it up as soon as possible, but is everybody okay if we stay a little bit longer than 6 o'clock? Oh, yeah. Okay. You know me, I have a short attention span, so we won't stay much longer than that, but we need to get this done. Commissioner Stevens, I believe you had a comment?
Yeah, I actually would like to make a motion that all 3 recommendations be adopted as written, okay? That's my motion. In doing that, I highlight the words evaluate and identify, evaluate and recommend, evaluate and recommend. So all we're asking for is information, so even if some of this isn't workable, then they will tell us it's not workable. So that's why I made the motion that way.
Motion's been made. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Motion's been made and seconded. We have discussion. Carla?
I would like to make a friendly amendment that 1 and 3 stand as is, but number 2, that the prior to the 2027-8 budget cycle change to prior to the 28-29 budget cycle, request staff to evaluate for review and recommendation, because how can we, as a budget review commission, make honest evaluations of things if we do not have any idea of what the numbers are? Didn't we learn that on APRW? We need 6 to 9 months on that one. Well, on this one, we're going to need a little bit longer because you're dealing with the state trust land department.
Commissioner Stevens, do you accept that as a friendly amendment?
I'm debating whether to do that or to call the question.
In the spirit of compromise.
Okay, yes, I'll accept it.
Okay, so the amendment has been made. Is it still seconded? So the motion is made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Otherwise, let's call a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 And the amendment was to just change 27, 28 to 28, yeah, 28, 29.
Here, I got it right here. You can take this one.
Yeah, she's got it, okay, okay. Thank you, Commissioner Newman, those were good recommendations. Commissioner Stevens?
Yeah, I'm not going to put it up there. I have several recommendations. I'm not going to put them up there. I'm going to possibly just go directly to council with this. But I just want to let you all know there are things I've talked to you about before. I'd like the FTE reductions to be looked at a little bit differently, and I'll go separately to the staff and the city manager on that, where you don't automatically replace people. I'm going to make a recommendation about software license, maintenance contracts, and things be evaluated for whether they're still being used before they automatically go forward, and also the sensitivity analysis on stop loss. So those things I'm going to go directly to you people or council with those recommendations.
Okay, great, thank you, thank you. So if there's no more discussion on item 3, let's go to item number 4, which is discuss the method of report presentation to the council. You know, last year we did a long report that I don't think anybody was really happy with the way that came out, even all of us who adopted that. I don't think we're happy with the way that came out. So, yeah, I think we're looking at doing it differently this time. More of a, a bullet point, a power presentation. So, Sonia?
Yeah, so next slide. So I just wanted to bring this section of the ordinance for the Budget Review Commission, where we added the language where it can be either a written report or a public presentation to be presented to council no later than the first regular meeting in May. All recommendations must be reviewed, discussed, and approved by a quorum of the commission at a public meeting. So if we didn't discuss this at the public meeting, we cannot put it into the recommendation as the BRC for council. Next slide. The council meeting that we have scheduled for the Budget Review Commission to present its recommendation and work to council is on May 5th. The May 5th meeting starts at 5. Staff will have our presentation of the proposed 26-27 operating budget and capital improvement plan to council, and the work study session will be after the regular meeting, where the council will receive the commission's report on its work and recommendations. Next slide. So as a proposed presentation to council, next slide, we will start by introducing the commission members. Next slide. We will also provide council with a recap of all the work that the commission has done. Next slide. And this is the slide where we will insert all the recommendations that the commission has voted on. That's all I have.
So does anyone have any discussion about that?
So the commission should talk about who should be presenting this, if you would like the chair and vice chair to, or if you would like individual commission members. So for example, if you want Commissioner Newman to speak to his recommendations, Commissioner Carla to speak to her recommendations, and the commission should decide the method of presenting this report to council.
Commissioner Carla.
I like the bullet point slides very much. It makes it simpler, it makes it cleaner. I think that the chair and vice chair should work out a presentation, between the two of them, with the chair taking the lead. And then when it comes to specific recommendations, what we did last time that seemed to make sense was if a council person had a question on that specific recommendation, then the person who made the recommendation handles the answering and the explaining, rather than bouncing around from commissioner to commissioner per recommendation.
Yeah, and I think that went really well last time.
And then at the very end, commissioners who haven't been able to speak, have a minute to, if they wanted to add anything. That would seem fair.
Are you making that as a motion, that that's the way we should proceed?
So moved.
So can I please clarify your motion? Are you Is your motion to have Chair Schweikert and Vice Chair Stevens work with staff to prepare this presentation with the bullet points of the recommendation, and for the commission to all be at the table with the council, and for each of the commission members to speak to their recommendations?
If the council questions them about the specific
Yes.
recommendation.
Yep.
Otherwise, the recommendations will just be presented as part of the presentation. And then the only thing else I want to stress as part of the motion is that no changes to the recommendations or major additions or deletions from what's on these slides will be made, the only exception being a possible truncation of Commissioner Newman's recommendation. And that I would ask that that then be sent out to the commission ahead of time, so we see it and we know what it is.
Yeah.
And
Is that workable?
then,
Okay.
at the very end, if a commissioner hasn't spoken, if they want to add anything, they can. That's my motion. Is it complicated enough?
Is there a second to that simple motion?
I'll second it.
Okay. Recommendation has been made and seconded that we,
One comment.
okay, sorry.
Just for clarification, like Brad's comments are pretty long, so my thought there is we could do it a little more brief, but then have an appendix to the presentation that would have the full comment as written.
I agree with that because I wrote it here just so we would understand it.
Right.
But for presentation purposes, a fine bullet point and then commentary to that is the recommendation. And of course, what's on paper, that will be in their book and all that. But
Yeah, it's just a
but we don't
recommendation.
have to walk everybody through that, torture by PowerPoint.
Yeah.
But all the bullet points should be truncated, like all the ones that currently exist.
Yeah.
Those are pretty good. The ones we already approved?
That's what I'm saying, is that his recommendations should be truncated to match those.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
That's
And then
what I'm
his
saying.
full one will be an appendix.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just a talking point, and then you can explain it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and in that regard, are we okay with, once the chairman and I are done with the presentation with staff, letting Commissioner Newman look at his portion, but then note we can't interact with anyone else so we don't violate the rules?
No, we don't interact, we get to see it.
You'll see it, but yeah.
Or an alternative, I could put the relevant bullet points on a piece of paper, send it to Sonia, and then you guys can work it out from there.
Okay.
Is that okay?
That might be cleaner.
Yeah, that works, okay.
Okay. Thank you.
So I think we have that. Did we vote on it yet? No. Okay, so let's vote on that. All those in favor of that method of presentation, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We just have quickly go on to propose future agenda items. And we have these are future agenda items that we had already discussed from last time. And I think we need to vote on each one of these as to whether or not we want these as future agenda items. Not for this budget, these would be meetings for this summer and the fall. So the first one is a report on loss of federal funding impact on budget for human services and how the city will address the potential deficits. Is there any clarification on making that exactly what is it we're looking for with that?
But this is actually part of a recommendation, right?
It was both a recommendation and also agendized as a future discussion item. So we just want clarification on what discussion you would like the staff to bring to the commission.
So Carl, I believe what you're saying is since it's already a recommendation, we don't need this as a future agenda item.
Well, I guess that leads to a very quick question, which is, based on the recommendations that go to council, if council accepts them all, then are we scheduling all of them for discussions at the appropriate time based on when numbers come in?
Yes, based on when numbers come in, yeah. We would schedule these for future meetings.
Well, then it seems premature to try and schedule it right now.
It was just a motion that was made so you can take it off.
Well, I like it because it takes so long to get things done. I'd rather keep this in here, and then that'll be one of the first things we cover next year. And if you need to skinny it down because something's not ready, use your judgment on that. Don't take too much time.
So we could vote on each of these individually, or we could just vote on this as proposed
Do 'em
future
all.
agenda items and take it all in one motion.
We actually need specific discussion on what you're looking for. So for example, the commission voted on agendizing. For example, the commission voted on agendizing incurred cost review of software maintenance, subscription costs, and round dollar large expenditures. We don't really know what that means, so we need specific discussion on what the commission is looking for and what you would like to discuss so that we know what to bring back to the commission for a future agenda item for discussion, or the degree to which AI opportunities exist in lowering costs without impairing citizen responsiveness. I mean, that's just way too broad for us. So some of these are very, very broad. We have a lot of software contracts. Are you looking at software contracts over a certain dollar amount? Same with the police, public safety, additional funding pro forma impact. I mean, we need more specifics as to, it's very broad.
Well, and some of these are, a lot of these are mine, and we haven't really talked about them a ton. What if you just said, future agenda item to discuss the degree to which the following items should be considered in the budget process? That way, what the meeting becomes, it just becomes going through each category, talking about it, and if everyone goes, hey, that's stupid, or hey, internal audit's already doing that, then we won't do that. If not, we'll talk about what level of scope, what should be done, and then that would become the frame for the action item for the next meeting. Okay, you look troubled. What is it? All you'll be doing is talking about what you would do, and you would be welcome to say, I think this is a dumb idea. And here's why, or here's why I don't think it's necessary.
Okay, all right. Yeah. We'll agendize it for discussion at a later meeting, and then we can bring back to you what we think you might want to hear.
Yes.
As it relates to our budget.
Yeah, not like the next meeting. This is at an undetermined future meeting.
I want the next meeting. No.
Because we don't have any meetings scheduled
Yeah.
other than the work study with council, right? On
Correct.
May 5th.
Correct.
Because then the A and C on this, they are recommendations. And for example, C, you can't do that till the numbers are in December anyway. And A, you can't do that probably till September because we don't know what the funds are coming from a federal level until then. Unless I'm wrong on that, Kara, but I think that's correct. So those would be delayed anyway.
So we don't have to identify what meeting these are going to be talked about. These are just future agenda items that we will address at some point in the future. Yeah, Commissioner Newman.
And just a comment to that, I'm probably the father of AI on this one. In this discussion, not the father of AI originally, but in this discussion, I don't want to send you off on a wild goose chase, but it's such a ubiquitous issue in technology and society. It does raise the question, should we be doing something like that? Now, I'm sure you're already doing things like that. It may be just a matter of saying, here's what we're already doing, and here's what we might do in the future. Or you might come back and say, it just doesn't make sense with some of the things we're doing, or here's where it does make sense. And then that satisfies it. But I'm not wanting to send anybody off on a wild goose chase because we've got other things like sales tax and things like that to talk about, so.
Commissioner Carla.
But there really was just a cool show about how they are using this in senior centers for people, especially with Alzheimer's, and they wear the, but anyway, so cool stuff. But my question is, after the work-study session, based on what direction we get from council, then you will poll us all on dates over the summer? Okay, just to
Yes.
clarify, thank you.
So does this take a motion? I don't think so. The chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Did you vote on the, adding the future agenda items? Did
No, we don't have to. We don't have to, because these are just, because these are just things for future agendas when we get around to meeting again.
But when you both prepare the first agenda, you can put those in there.
Yes.
Because when you do the first meeting, you two.
Yeah, there are things we're going to talk about. We just don't have to move them for a
Go ahead, vote to
particular
close the
agenda.
meeting. Or did we?
Everybody voted by getting up.
Yeah, right. We lost our quorum. They voted by killing the quorum.
That was pretty good.
What's that?
It was pretty good overall.
Oh, yeah? What was good, what was helpful for you?
Well, just really getting to understand the procedure, the process.
Oh. It's not real efficient.
You know, we don't get to audit, we don't really get to like poke your fingers into things and look at stuff and ask questions. So we're not.
That's what I'm struggling with, is making a difference, and where's the substance at? So, we're pretty